Good evening. I'm Alice Bloom. My guest tonight is a familiar face in the village of Mamaroneck, Mayor Norm Rosenblum. Mayor, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Oh, we have
Always.
so much to talk about. We haven't talked since election night. And we
Correct.
covered a lot of ground, but there's lots more to cover.
Very active community.
And there's lots going on. First of all, I hear that you are running for re-election.
I am. I'm so declared, and so did Deputy Mayor Santoro.
Okay, well, best of luck. That's in
Thank
November, so hopefully you have a quiet summer, and I guess things will heat up in September when real campaigning gets started.
Thank you for the good wishes, but I doubt it. Nothing is very calm in the village usually.
Well, Mamaroneck, I'm glad you said that. Mamaroneck actually is quite robust these days. I mean, there's a lot of activity. Certainly if you go down Mamaroneck Avenue, it is hopping.
Absolutely. We are, I would describe us as seriously the #1 destination and development area in Westchester County. Like I've said many times before, the key in development is keeping the character of the village the way it is. You have to maintain and increase your tax base as much as possible. But it is very successful.
Well, we've enjoyed tremendous interest by good restaurants, not the fast food restaurants we all feared early on in the 80s and early 90s, but really wonderful destination restaurants. And many of them have cafes outside, and the weather permitting, they're out on the street, and it's really created quite a party atmosphere. What are the complications of having a street like that?
Well, like every success, you have problems goes along with it. The main one is parking. I have proposed in the past couple of years tier parking in the CVS area and in the Spencer lot. But in the discussion, there were some concerns. I had established an mayor's ad hoc committee. And ironically, not only was that ad hoc committee who represented business and local residents, they were interested in tier parking plus potential retail space, especially behind CVS. And then I also got to the point where perhaps you need more information. Then we were talking about potential changes in the meters and rates. Do we get multi-space meters? Do we put it on the post road and so on? So bottom line, without going to a whole long dissertation, is that the Village of Mamaroneck will be going out and doing an intense parking structure and parking study to go along with the Village of Mamaroneck.
All right, so it's not a done deal.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. What do you feel the sentiment of the community is about a tiered parking?
I've gotten both. The majority of the people are interested in it. It's been endorsed by the local Chamber of Commerce. A lot of businesses told me they want to do it. One of the problems uniquely is that even though the businesses are in favor of it, they're in parcel part of the problem, because it's the employees that will go out and feed the meter and so on. So
they still do that? I mean, that's been a problem since I moved here in the 80s.
And we used to have with you're marking the tires, and they would go out and they would wipe the tire off from the chalk. But the idea is to have long-term, cheaper parking in the back off the main street, and if people want to park, they would pay for the convenience of parking on Mamaroneck Avenue. But this started because I read a federal study where a municipality our size, of between 18 to 20,000, should have approximately 1,200 parking spaces. And we have about 300 on Mamaroneck Avenue. So we can literally double it.
Is there any way to use some of the space in Harbor Island at night, for example, and have a shuttle bus?
That was one of the suggestions, exactly that. Have the shuttle bus like they did with the wine trail.
Yeah.
And have that at night of Mamaroneck, along Mamaroneck Avenue. And actually, I would like to see, which is another part of not just Mamaroneck Avenue, you go up to the Post Road, perhaps to Barry Avenue, down Halstead Avenue, because the village is growing and it's spreading out. You know how where Chalkulations is, you have Nemia.
That's on Boston Post Road, right, in
And then you have the new Fiamma restaurant on Halstead Avenue, which is excellent. You can't go in and the other restaurants across from the railroad station. So it is expanding, and that exacerbates even more the parking because there's no parking.
Okay, so parking is one problem. How about noise? Is that a problem for people who live? We have dual zoning, so you have people living above the stores and the Regatta, of course. And I know people there feel very compromised by Molly Spillane's, which is a great party restaurant. It's a great place, but you hear a lot of concern and a lot of frustration with the noise from
That's true. And there's no perfect situation. You're in a commercial zone, and it's a mixed use, so you're going to have it. So what we've done is you work with Mike and you work with Dawn or who else has it. At the same way,
those are restaurant owners.
Right. At the same way, when they have the bands and they bring it in, we've sort of changed and amended the noise limits. We work with them. They close the windows. It's a mutual thing working together.
Now, I had heard that some of the restaurants, I know Dawn, meaning Cafe Mozart.
Right.
I've been here for a long time, wonderful restaurant. has parties in the summer. I think it's on Thursday nights.
Correct, every Thursday night.
Every Thursday night, and during the rest of the year, they have music on Fridays and Saturday nights indoors.
Yes.
Now, outdoors, they're permitted to move into the street, and they have some blocked-off seating area, and
Correct.
it's always a fabulous party.
Right.
They get great bands and stuff. I had heard that he wants to expand to more frequent parties. Is that so?
Not that I heard of. The only thing that would affect is when they changed Mamaroneck Shares to a Friday night.
Oh, okay.
So if he has the band on Thursday night and then participates in the 4 events, you would have it Thursday and
Right,
Friday
so
night.
Mamaroneck Shares is 4 events throughout the summer. Right?
But regardless, it's always up to the mayor and board of trustees to give permission.
decide.
So it's a balance. You have to look at a balance. You want to keep the people coming to the village of Mamaroneck. I can honestly tell you, no matter where I go throughout Westchester County, people tell me how great the village of Mamaroneck is, and it's a destination.
I'm seeing lots of friends from
It's amazing,
Scarsdale and
right.
Larchmont who didn't
Well,
used to come.
I can tell you a funny story. One of the people I work with at SafeLight, their relative is involved in the city of Yonkers, and I was told they actually had a discussion in one of the council meetings. We have to find out what Mamaroneck is doing because we have to do the same thing
Well,
to attract people.
what is it? What attracted people here? For a long time, businesses languished. Let's just say we didn't have quite the vitality that we have now. What do you think changed things?
Well, I think Molly Splains helped, sort of an anchor. Dawn's, it's the programs, the Mamaroneck Shares, the St. Patrick's Day Parade. It's now user-friendly. My main goal is to not dictate, but to coordinate and facilitate, and that's just what's happening. People come into the village of Mamaroneck, and we make it much easier for them to come in and create events.
Oh, for
such
people
as-
who are
absolutely,
open
right.
restaurants and
I get
and-
emails and meetings almost on an average once a month of people who want to come into the village. This sort of segues into another area, if you want to talk about it, which is the industrial area. The industrial area right now, we've been talking about this a lot. It's probably the most underutilized for the best purpose, for the best use in that area. It has the potential of development for the village of Mamaroneck, which should not create as much problems as potential other developments, so on.
the industrial area, of course, is zoned for businesses.
But we're looking to potentially rezone that. We're also going to be doing a study on that. I can tell you, people have come in, developers that we now have a planner in the village of Mamaroneck. We have a new engineer, which is again another reason why the village is. We ask why we're doing so well. We have a new head of the building department. We're more user-friendly. And again, I just repeat it, any municipality that does not continue to develop will die from atrophy. You can't rest on your laurels, or you really can't waste based on your real estate
But how do you
tax.
balance keeping the character of the village, which is a small town kind of feeling, with that need to develop? I mean, what are the risks here?
Well, it depends on what comes in, but what you do is you do in a particular zoning area. In other words, you want to develop, you can create zoning where it's a mixed use, such as the TOD study. We just completed the TOD study. We got approximately 60,000. That's a transit-oriented development. And again, that's developed mixed use for housing and retail, where you don't use cars, where people can walk back and forth.
Well, I've always thought the village of Mamaroneck was a great walking village. I had friends who'd come from New Rochelle or other places with me, and when we had young children. Park the car once, go for lunch, go to the post office, go to the library, go to the bank, take care of all your errands, get your hair cut, and never have to move your car. I mean, it's just remarkable, and I never thought that was really exploited enough. Those of us who live here know we can do it. Of course, there still are some people who have to move the car if you're going to walk 2 blocks.
Well, some people,
Some people
unless they park right in front,
I mean,
they're not
there's
gonna be happy.
resistance to parking even in the Hunter lot, which is across from the police station, and walking that little block down to Mamaroneck Avenue. How about Harbor Island? I mean, we've done lots of work there. Are you still looking for a restaurant to come into?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that is one of the perfect examples to talk about how you increase your revenue, protect the taxpayer or the homeowner, and helping them keep there, quite honestly. Where the old cement factory is, when you go down to the left, it's now the bait store. We are looking for proposals. I'll be quite honest, 30 years ago, they wanted to put up a chart house. I actually fought against the chart house, not the concept of a restaurant. Then I was in favor of it, and I'm still in favor of it now. The chart house, however, wanted a guarantee of all the parking spaces, and it was too big. But you can have, this is typical of a development, and the type of development you want. You put out requests for proposals. in essence, you say, this is not specific yet, but the general idea, we would like a contractor to come in, build the building, doesn't cost the village anything, you run it, we get revenue from that, and part of that is you also have to bring in new docks. So now you attract people like they do in Long Island, directly across from us, so they can come in by boat, they can stop at that restaurant, they can get up and walk up Mamaroneck Avenue.
Well, this had been looked at before, and there were some damning issues. One, we have a sewage treatment plant across the way, just
Correct.
across the driveway, and that's not necessarily, even though it's the best sewage treatment plant, best looking sewage treatment plant ever, it still is not an attractive feature for a restaurant.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of perception. I believe that that would be neutralized very honestly, because if you look at it, there is not, the village of Mamaroneck Harbor Island is the truly only open public access space as a park between the Bronx border and Connecticut. There are very few public spaces, if any, that's a restaurant on the water. We would be one of the first to do it. I can tell you we've already had 2 proposals just by me mentioning it. And I know there are 3 or 4 other people interested in it. And the idea that what you want to do is set it up where the village, you spend someone else's money. The smart developer spends other people's money. And you can do it because what we have is parkland. No matter what you do and develop down there, it automatically belongs to the village of Mamaroneck. So it's a matter of, because it's parkland, by law you have to do that. So you set it up where you get revenue and you bring people into the village of Mamaroneck.
But don't we have to be so careful not to take away space from the passive recreation and the active recreation that goes on there? I mean, we've fought for that so hard, which brings me to another question, and that is about Sport Time. Not a surprise. Sport Time wants to build a larger building and
Correct.
move it into the what we call the shadow of the waste treatment plant. A how do we describe it? A multi-purpose recreational building?
Right.
Recreational building that will house tennis courts and perhaps hockey and basketball and whatever. What's the status of that?
Well, unfortunately what happened for a period of probably over 10 to 12 years, this has been going back and forth. This is, I would describe it as a political disaster. Both Republicans and Democrats, I believe, have destroyed the possibility of moving Sport Time away from where it is now behind a sewage treatment plant. And the reason that is you wanted to open up the entire vista. One of the reasons, and became controversial, was if that happens, who pays for it?
Right.
One of the options was the village of Mamaroneck would bond it, and the reason that would be is because the village would borrow the money at a much lower rate than if they did it. So we could borrow at 1 to 2%, they would do 11 to 12%. And the reason theoretically behind that is that we get a percentage of the money that they make, so we would get more money. However, what's changed is we went out and got a legal opinion. The village of Mamaroneck cannot bond that. Okay. So it becomes a moot point.
So does that mean they won't move forward with it?
They still have an option, which I very seriously, I can almost say for a fact, I can't, but I would project that they will not look to spend their own money to do it. They're going to stay where they are. They will take their contractual rights, and they will probably, if they so choose, to develop.
Well, I remember reading the original agreements, which actually
Right.
provided that they would do the financing. The village was never
Correct.
supposed to
And
be
that's
involved in that.
And that's what they'll do now, and that's what it was.
So
It
that
was
it's
just-
unlikely that they will build the large
Right.
building in the middle of the park.
The difference is that right now we get about $350,000 a year in revenue. The concept, while we discussed it behind the sewage treatment plant, the projection revenue went up to $1 million. Becomes a moot point now. So that's what it is. But I can
So
tell
that's
you
there.
that.
So that, are they going to do a better building at where the tennis courts are now?
I would presume they would, because that would benefit
But it would
them
be there.
and also the village of Mamaroneck.
Have they a proposal out now, or is this
No,
still in the talking
it's,
phase?
the stage now is communicated to Sport Time what we received from our legal advice that
so
we can't do it.
it's
Sometimes
just
I
all
have to come back. Right.
Okay, so it's all stopped. Okay,
And the real thing in that, what the shame of it was, and the reason I say I blame both parties back and forth, is that the last go-around, actually right before I got in, there was a negotiation, and there was, in the contract, a termination clause. For whatever reason, that was given out, so we have absolutely no leverage whatsoever, so which is a shame.
okay. Well, I guess there are many people who
still
feel it
looking
isn't. There are many people who were not so happy about a larger building.
Oh,
Even
no,
though
I'm just talking about we have no leverage even where they are.
I see. In what they build.
Right. They have an as of right, but it's.
But
they're still
isn't
gonna
it
have to-
limited in size?
Oh, yeah, it's a square footage, it's in a contract and everything else.
Right. But they won't be moving it and opening up
No.
the park. way we had hoped. Okay, another big issue in the village, Hampshire. We can't meet without talking about that because everybody's talking about Hampshire. Tell me what the status of the application of the Hampshire developers, I don't know what their name is.
Okay, there's a lot of misnomer in this, and I'm glad you brought it up, because if you didn't, I was. The Village of Mamaroneck, let me do a segue into it this way. The Mayor and Board of Trustees met with 4 potential candidates for land use attorneys recently. That was based on from the budget process and so on. And I can tell you there's one central theme that all 4 candidates said, and that was procedure. The Village of Mamaroneck must protect yourself from procedure. My concern is, and I actually had and discussed it with the village attorney, Charlie Goldberger, he sent out a letter to all boards and commissions, all employees in the Village of Mamaroneck, until, and I'm not talking specifically about Hampshire or anyone else, this is just in general, until the project is presented to either the mayor and board of trustees and or the planning board, you have to make no statements. The last thing I want to see in this village is another Mamaroneck Beach and Yacht Club. I want to see another Westchester Day School, where because of procedural mistakes, the day school cost us $4.5 million. We've spent millions just on legal fees in Mamaroneck Beach and Yacht Club. That's been going on for 10 years and so on. I, again, will repeat, I will say nothing specific about Hampshire Country Club under legal, but I will give you a general background.
Okay.
General background was, if you go back, Valerie O'Keefe and I, when she was the mayor a couple of years ago, supervisor, excuse me, we went out and we actually bid to buy Hampshire Country Club.
Let's just back up for those who don't really know. Hampshire was an ongoing concern, golf course and clubhouse, and it was on the verge of bankruptcy. This is about 3 years ago, is that correct? And the property was sold.
Well, it was sold, I believe, for $12 or $15 million,
as I seem to remember, to the entity that owns it now.
Correct.
And as I understand it, they have made informal overtures or let the community know that they are interested in building a multi-story building on what is largely the footprint of the existing clubhouse.
Right. While nothing has been presented to the Board of Trustees.
That's what they've presented to the community.
But the whole community knows what's been presented to the community.
Well, they've invited the community in to see their plans.
The Board of Trustees actually went to see it on both sides, and I've had discussions with both sides and both parties. There are 2 basic proposals. The first proposal was there's 117 acres. 3 acres are now where the existing clubhouse is. Their proposal was to take 1 acre and build this 1 unit for 120 units plus the
multi-story building.
Right. There was a lot of controversy, which continues. The subsequent Plan B, which then came out, is they would build 106 homes. So
individual
there's
single-family homes on the golf course. Would that mean that they would be eliminating the golf course?
I would believe that's what it would mean.
In order to do that, the golf course would not function. If they
right.
built the multi-story building, do they expect to preserve the golf course?
That would be up to them, and that would be something that would be discussed.
We don't know that yet.
And just procedurally, if they want to do the first thing, they would require a zoning change. Right. So then they would come and present their idea and request before the Mayor and Board of Trustees.
And they would require a zoning change because they're in the marine zone.
Correct. Would have to change to allow them to do it.
Marine zone does not allow housing.
Correct.
Okay.
If they want to do the housing, they have an as of right because it's R20, and then it goes into cluster housing and section and so on.
But as of right means they don't need a variance and they don't need
variances.
and they don't need zoning changes.
They might need some variances. I don't know.
Well, probably
floodplain
floodplain variances in the area.
But they would then go to the planning board, and they wouldn't go to the Mayor and Board of Trustees
because
at all.
They wouldn't need a zoning change.
Right. The difference is if you have the first potential discussion, and I'm not saying this Hampshire Country Club, if you have any developer come to the Mayor and Board of Trustees and ask for a development, the Board of Trustees has the decision to entertain the idea or refuse it. In either case, there's no liability if you refuse it, and there's no liability if you go ahead with it. And as happened before, the Board of Trustees, if they presume to become the lead agency, these are all technical aspects, you would require that any applicant to pay for a CEQA. And then you
State Environmental Quality Review
Correct.
Act.
And so you see, then the entire community would have the possibility of presenting their concerns, and you direct it to the planning board.
Now, if the board of Trustees actually accepts the plan just to examine it, that is not like accepting,
Absolutely
you're not
not.
giving a zoning change.
There's a couple of different scenarios in that. If any contractor or developer comes in, we can consider certainly their request. We can definitely require them to do a secret study. We can refer to the planning board. We can ask information from them, what they think they could build in any situation. They would require to pay for it. And if they come back and the board decides, well, that's no good, that's it, it's too bad. That's the chance that the developer
It
takes.
seems at this point camps have formed. We know that there's a
Yes.
very vigorous opposition.
Yes, on both sides.
On both sides, and war chests are being filled.
And spent.
I'm sure you're right. If you could control this situation, how would you like to see it proceed?
I would like to see it proceed where those that can have to make a decision, mainly the Mayor and Board of Trustees, has as much sufficient information as possible to make a cogent and realistic decision. Right now, I don't think the Mayor and Board has enough information. I can tell you what's out there, what's been said by both sides. A lot of claims are there. I've been having in-depth discussions with our legal advice in general as to procedural purposes. Again, I'll get back to the most important aspect of this now is procedure, and this is to protect the taxpayers. You're not even getting to the point where you're talking about a development.
I understand that. There are people who are very concerned because, as you've mentioned, Mamaroneck Beach and Yacht,
Right.
very concerned about the precedent that could be set if a zoning change were granted for this property, which is in the marine zone, and we set a precedent for other boatyards or clubs that wish a zoning change, and up until now it's been resisted. That's what I hear from people. Is there any way to employ a land use mediation format to get everybody together to actually talk about what is being proposed and what the relative merits and alternatives could be?
That's exactly the point I was making before. You don't have the information. I don't know if it sets a precedent. I've heard both arguments. I've heard that one particular property is not the same as another particular property. What you decide here will not affect there, and it's different characteristics and so on. But I can tell you, when I completed the land use course at Pace University, I wish I brought it with me. There's a chart, and it shows how not to negotiate and how not to proceed in a situation typical like this here.
And is that what
and
we're
it
doing
shows
now?
how absolutely sides are not talking. What
So
we
what-
talked about before. They're not talking to each other.
So
they're talking
that's
at
what
each
I am
other.
suggesting. I also took
Right.
land use courses at Pace and
Right.
sat on the planning
We
board for
probably took the
10
same,
years.
right.
We probably took the same courses. Is there not yet in place an opportunity for a land use mediation, a situation to sit down with an objective facilitator and really at least get clear and coherent information about what the rights and obligations of all parties might be, so that the community, instead of forming factions, could hear it out? I mean, if there's no recourse, there's no recourse, but maybe
You're
people are
singing for the
feared.
chorus. I agree with you 100%.
But is there no way to do that? You're in the position to
I've been
employ that.
trying to determine how we could do that. So far, there's nothing there. And again, unfortunately, I'll get back to, I can't say anything directly about Hampshire. I can only talk, theoretical and everything else. Well, everybody knows what's going on. But we will make no statements whatsoever as far as something that's not been presented to the village.
Okay.
So how can you investigate something that hasn't been presented to us yet?
But this is what's causing so much stress.
I know.
People do believe that they know.
Well,
They
and-
know.
Right. Well, of
what
course,
they-
people know everything.
We
but,
have
you
only
know.
a minute or two
Okay.
left, and there's so many other
Right.
things to talk about. I know that you are that you have obligations tonight. The town of Mamaroneck has reassessed all properties in the town of Mamaroneck, so that at full value.
Right.
And for better or for worse, and people are appealing their assessments, and some have gotten some accommodation, and it's moving forward. Many of those properties in the town of Mamaroneck are in the village of Mamaroneck. Is the
40%.
40%, okay, because then the rest are in the town of Rye,
Correct.
which has
already
already
done it.
enjoyed a
Right.
reassessment. Will the village of Mamaroneck now embrace the town of Mamaroneck's assessments? I mean, so you have people with two
That's-
different assessments on their property.
That's a possibility. Right now, you still have two different assessments in the town of Rye and the village also. It depends on what happens in the village of Mamaroneck. Right now, ironically, and this is a general case when you have reassessment like this, you go a third, a third, and a third. A third stays the same, a third goes down, and a third
So they
goes up.
say, right.
Larchmont, I understand, shot up. Village of Mamaroneck actually went down, and the town stayed the same. It depends on what's most advantageous to the
But
village of
what
Mamaroneck.
happens to people in the village of Mamaroneck with two assessments? So they're assessed at one rate for their town, county, school taxes, and their village taxes are based on a different assessment.
Right, and
Does that-
you still, oh no, the town tax determines what your school tax is.
Right.
The village tax is separate by itself, and you have the right as a business owner or a homeowner to go in and challenge both the town and the village.
Right. Will the
A lot of times what happens, I mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
what will happen is if the town does something, the village will wait to see what it is on an individual certiorari claim and vice versa. But generally you wait for the town. And that's because it has a direct effect on, your biggest tax is your school tax, 54% of your tax.
Right,
is
but the
school.
village, of course, as we've talked about so many times, does assess taxes, and it's
Yes.
imperative to do that because that's your working money.
Right.
Where's it going to come from? So what I'm saying, has this double assessment caused confusion or problems for people who live in both the village of Mamaroneck and the town of Mamaroneck?
I don't see any problems other than it's aggravating and it calls for consolidation of governments, but other than that,
You don't see that happening anytime soon.
no. Although I'd like to see a vote for coterminous again in the village of Mamaroneck.
Are you brave enough to bring that up again?
Yes,
Three
I
votes in
think-
1975.
I know.
Do you think
I
that would ever happen?
I think that now's the time to do it.
You know, I used to think that if the economy got bad enough, our municipalities would really start seriously talking about consolidating. Here we are in one community, the town of Mamaroneck, and of course the town of Rye. We don't even want to go into how complicated this is. 3 municipal governments, 3 fire departments, 3 police departments, 2 sanitation departments, all within what, 7 miles?
Absolutely, even less.
Even.
But the reason I would support coterminous of the village of Mamaroneck, the village of Mamaroneck is self-sufficient. It would literally cost us nothing and we wouldn't end up making money by going coterminous. We have DPW, we have police, we have a court, we have an assessor. Your court and your assessor is required. We could be independent overnight tomorrow. And as a town, we would get a higher portion of the sales tax.
Is that your big project? Do you think you'll champion that kind of a...
I don't know while I'm
project?
mayor. I might have to, that would be big enough to, while I'm not mayor. I would certainly, entertain it. I brought it up actually because I'm on the committee with the town of Rye, for the dissolving town of Rye. I've brought that up several times. But realistically, if we go back before, and the reason you still have all these towns, no one wants to give up their little power and fiefdom. So unfortunately, that's pragmatic.
I talked with so many people when I did a study of this a few years ago when the town of Rye was doing a reassessment and we were studying coterminous. And I talked with people who were spearheading the effort here in the mid-1970s.
Right.
And people just held their heads and said, I don't want to talk about it. And they just didn't have the guts or the strength to go through it again.
But the funny part is it passed every time in the town of Rye.
Right.
It failed in the town of Mamaroneck, and the reason it failed in the town of Mamaroneck is understandable. If the town of Mamaroneck loses the industrial area and actually from the Mamaroneck River over, they lose a tremendous tax base. Of course they don't want to do it. And Larchmont, in essence, voted against it. But there is some movement in Larchmont that they, in turn, would look perhaps to become independent coterminous town village. If that happens, now you have 60 to 70% of the town would be in favor of it. So, I might be just
probably
smoking
not
in the
going to
wind,
be
but
your reelection
no. Oh, absolutely
theme.
not.
I don't think so.
That's,
Mayor, thank you so much for being
My
my guest. We
pleasure.
have so much more to talk about. We've covered
Absolutely.
lots of ground. You'll come back?
Definitely, anytime. It was a
Be
pleasure.
my
Thank you.
pleasure.
Always.
Thank you,
And
Norm.
thank you, LMC TV.
Yes, there's so
very-
much more to talk
right.
about. You'll have to come back. I'm Alice Bloom. Thanks so much for watching.